We have some great presentations tonight, but first, I would love to hear from Alicia Chavez to talk a little bit about CESOSS and our organization for those who are unfamiliar with it. So go ahead, Alicia.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So happy to see you. I'm excited for the interns presentations. You guys are going to do so good. I already know it. My name is Alicia Chavez. I'm the board president for CESOSS. The mission and vision for CESOSS reads that we envision a sustainable, healthy, and thriving community where traditions connected to land and water are protected, preserved, and passed on to future generations. The mission of CESOSS is to protect historical acequias, water, and land in the Middle Rio Grande region. So the ways that we do that are through the Leadership Institute, which this is the culmination of, where the interns learn about water issues, learn about land issues in the Central Rio Grande region, but also throughout the state of New Mexico, and then create a project that addresses that. And this year, the interns looked at bills that affect water and land in New Mexico. We also do Acequia walk and talks so that people that are maybe unfamiliar or want to be more familiar, Acequias get to walk along the Acequia, learn about it from a parciante or someone who uses or is familiar with that Acequia. And it's just a nice way for community to get together and do something healthy. And we also do Water Rights 101, where people get to learn more about what water rights are, if you have them on your land. And then we do some work around getting people back their water rights that may have lost it. And there's a lot of other work at the legislature that we do and to protect water in this region. I'm so excited for you all. I used to be an intern and learned so much during that time. And I'm just grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. So I see Santiago is here. So Santiago, would you like to talk about an overview of the legislative sessions this year, especially with regards to land and water? I think he's unmuting, so give it 1 second.
I'll take the podium, Lauren. So I wanna welcome everybody and thank you for taking the time out to in this, like Senator Kerry said, a beautiful, gorgeous Saturday afternoon. Back in 2003, from 2003 to 2010. We set out with Santiago and a lot of the elders of this community to put back the acequias here in the South Valley, no? And that was truly a grassroots operation and effort because we didn't have money and we didn't have lawyers, and so we had to do a lot of reading to understand the context of the acequia law and the rights that belong to the people of this community. We learned a lot along the way. We did. But for me, the most beautiful thing that actually happened during that period of time, which you can imagine was a little bit hectic and tumultuous and people were not very happy. And, we had all different sorts of issues with the state and local people who didn't feel that they needed to be under the rules and regulations of the Acequias. So it was a conflict, but it was a conflict that reflected what happened back in 1925 and 1935 when the MRGDC was established. No, a lot of confusion, but thankfully we were able to sort of like put it together and really understand both the value of the MRGDC as well as the value of the Acequias. And I can very happily say that at the end, it was a very positive, very healing process where our community actually make amendments and we now we're very close partners with the MRGDC and there's peace with the past in that sense, no? And so talking about drought, we understand that acequias are not just a relic of the past, no? It's not something that it's not a romantic idea about maintaining a culture and traditions that existed in the past and they're not relevant anymore. I believe that they're relevant now more so than ever, especially with the way the drought is moving and the way to understand water from a different perspective. And acequias, apart from being a hydrologic system, has a spiritual component to it. No, it's a very beautiful system that goes back to all the way to North Africa and goes back to the idea that we all deserve water. Water is a right that we should respect. And, as we all know, water has lost some of that in terms of it became a commodity, But in spite of those challenges that we still face day in, day out, especially with efforts like Santolina and some other uses that are just irrelevant to the needs of the people of New Mexico, we're still moving forward with keeping that up because we see that as important moving into the future, not only for the betterment of the valley and the betterment of perhaps continue to improve a small agriculture, which here in the South Valley, along with the project of putting back the acequias, we also started out the small agriculture. And so now we have, small organic farmers living off the land like that. So to me, there is hope, no? And so, but one thing that we learned and that we couldn't really put on the side, no, is that in life we might win a battle. That doesn't mean that we will win the war at the end of the day, no. And so we knew that we learned a lot through the process, and we learned how difficult it is to understand some of the legalities of the water issues. And so we started to think, well, if we want to move into the future and preserve this idea of maintaining acequias and bringing back the history, the culture, the relationships, and everything that entails, well, then we should start preparing our future generation, our next generations, to understand the complexities of the legal system, the complexities of policy, and start in a small way passing on what we learned through this process. And so this Leadership Institute has internally and ingrained this idea that if we want to move into the future with a different understanding, then we start to we need to start cultivating the seeds of the future, no? So these beautiful young ladies, very smart, very dedicated, very humble, and they're part of this contribution that me and Santiago and CESOSS board and all the people that we cannot necessarily count with our fingers and our mouths. All of those efforts are coming to this idea of creating our future leaders, people who will not be afraid of the legal system, who will not feel exempt from the legal system, who will understand that it's all a matter of understanding that all those things belong to us, that we have access to all these things. We just have to force ourselves a little bit more to understand a somewhat of a complicated system that at the end of the day is not. We just have to own it, go through it, and set up the mentorship process by which this generation is able to carry on the next generation and ingrain that process. So this generation of young leaders can carry the next generation. And so by doing that, create this true intergenerational process of people who care about water, not because it's a commodity, not because it's trending or any of those things, but because it's a matter of life and survival for our community. So I wanna thank you all for, especially the senators and representatives who are taking time out, because I know that when it comes to fighting in the trenches, you guys are there, and we've seen it. We know it, how difficult it is, especially in a system like ours, like our modern system, where money, greed, and privilege and influence and all of that is always prone to buy things, even if it goes against the same people that it should supposed to protect. And so I wanna truly appreciate the service that you guys give into the state of New Mexico. We've known Senator Linda for so long, and she's such a beautiful and a strong part of our community, just as many other people, just as all of you guys are attending. And just as much as all of these beautiful women, young women who are coming to tell us about what they learned through this process in this short period of time that we were able to collaborate and learn from one another. So I want to say thank you. And I guess I'm going to introduce also Santiago. Santiago has been our leader in this community. He took that initiative. I've worked with Santiago for so many years. And one thing that I have to appreciate about Santiago is that he never puts his interests before anything, you know. Very giving in that sense. And I also want to say that, and I feel very proud of this, no, is that Santiago and I had the opportunity to drive down to Tlisco, Mexico in Puebla. And Santiago, as they will say in the old times, no, he's our Tlaloque, the person who represents the spiritual side of the water in this community. And I feel very honored. I was very proud. I was very grateful that the Spirit put me to work with this man, because I've learned a lot, and I'm hoping to continue learning from his example. Muchas gracias, Santiago. Y tienes la palabra.
Pues muchas gracias, Jorge. Pues bienvenidos a todos a esta junta de CESOSS, de la última presentación de nuestros estudiantes. You know, I got involved in the New Mexico Acequia Association back in 2005 when I complained that we had lost our connection to our local Acequia through neglect and abandonment. And in 2000, late in 2004, I was invited by the New Mexico Acequia Association to a meeting of ringleaders, is what they called it. And these ringleaders then were given an education program in terms of what were the water laws in New Mexico and what were our rights as acequeros, and how long has these rights been established. So I learned that I lived on a parcel of land in Pajarito in the South Valley from the Pajarito land grant that had rights that extended back to 1747. So this was during the colonial period. And so these rights then pertain to the little half acre of farmland that I had that was connected to the Ruby Lateral and the Pajarito Acequia. I learned also that these rights had not been adjudicated nor forfeited, that these lands had been continuously irrigated since 1747, and that we also were still subject to the Acequia laws of the state of New Mexico, in spite of being under the jurisdiction, management, and administration of the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District. So with that information, I was armed to start assisting our local, my neighbors, basically, my vecinos, on how to apply for their pre-1907 water rights, to declare them with the Office of the State Engineer, and with the assistance of NMAA, the New Mexico Acequia Association, and Amigos Bravos, Lucy Sanchez. We went ahead and made 327 applications for declarations of water rights for members of our community. We held meetings in our local Catholic churches, in Atrisco, Holy Family, in Armijo, and these are all acequias that serve our communities. And in Armijo, St. Anne's, down here in Ranchos de Atrisco, we have St. Edwin's, and in Pajarito and Los Padillas, we share the parish of Ascension. So we held community meetings. We signed up members to the New Mexico Acequia Association and to the South Valley Regional Association of Acequias. Since each of these communities, Atrisco, Armijo, Ranchos de Atrisco, Pajarito, and Los Padillas, all had acequias predating the formation of the Middle Rio Grande Conservancy District. So with this, then we would have been able to assert our rights to water. In addition to that, we've been drawn into the battles over land use. In order to maintain these acequias, in order to maintain our rural and agricultural traditions, we've had to be involved in both legislative and in local county administrative events and meetings with the county commission, with our legislators, with the governor. And so these are the technical issues that we have to address, and they require an educated workforce as such. Educated volunteers, we're all volunteers. All of our commissioners, there's 3 commissioners for each acequia, and 1 mayordomo. They all need to know what these acequia laws are, what the local bylaws are, what the land use policies, and how to enforce them, because we have enforcement power, both over maintaining and keeping the acequias running, our venas, our little laterals that branch off the MRGCD, administered and controlled ditches, as well as transfers of water rights to industry and to our neighbors. Basically, Los Lunas is buying up water rights in order to provide water to the Facebook plant. Sandoval County is buying out, Rio Rancho is buying water rights in order to provide water rights to Intel. So, these are the threats to our water rights here, as well as development. Santolina is the major development that we've been fighting since 2013. We've succeeded in the New Mexico Supreme Court with the help of the New Mexico Environmental Law Center and their legal staff. Douglas Mickeljohn, our former CESOSS director, now is the executive director of the New Mexico Environmental Law Center. So we've been able to develop talent and professional expertise through our work in CESOSS. And you're the next generation. And so I want to welcome you to join this battle, this way of continuing our customs, our tradition, our way of life here in the South Valley, including the North Valley and the Middle Rio Grande. Our communities to the north and to the south, our indigenous communities of Sandia Pueblo, Santa Ana Pueblo, and Isleta Pueblo here on the Rio Grande. So with that, bienvenidos y bendiciones de San Isidro y su esposa María de la Cabeza rezan por lluvia. Bueno, gracias.
Thank you, Santiago. Thank you, Jorge. Thank you, Alicia. So we will start with our presentations. I would like to introduce our first presenter, Ericka Arias. Ericka graduated from Augustina College with a BA in Spanish Education and Religion and a minor in Latin American Studies. She is from the Chicago suburbs area and moved to Albuquerque during the summer of 2019 to pursue her graduate school at UNM. Ericka is working on a dual degree in Latin American Studies and Community and Regional Planning and hopes to work as a community activist and organizer for Latino communities in the US upon her graduation. So with that being said, Ericka, it's all yours.
Thank you, Lauren. So as Lauren was saying, I'm Ericka. For my presentation, I'm going to focus on New Mexico House Bill 194. But before I begin with my analysis, I'll introduce myself a little bit more. So with my education background being in Spanish education, I was a teacher for a few years. And now that I'm in New Mexico, I'm kind of switching gears and shifting more towards focusing on communities. So I've really appreciated my time with CESOSS and getting some insight on local community issues and community resilience as well. So starting with the House Bill, House Bill 194 focuses on acequias. And I know that Jorge and Santiago talked a little bit about acequias earlier, but just some more information on acequias is that acequias have been around for at least 400 years, which is more than twice the time that New Mexico has been a territory or a state of the US, which just shows like the history and the legacy behind acequias and acequia communities. And acequia culture is based on principles of reciprocity, mutualism or mutual help or aid, and also querencia. With acequia's communities, strength and resilience stemming from these notions of mutual support and also feeling very deeply connected to their land and their water. And then some more on House Bill 194. So this was aiming to be an amendment to the ACDF Act, the Acequia and Community Ditch Fund Act, which was established in 1988 with the aim of providing financial support for water rights cases. And with this amendment, it was aimed at expanding funding to acequia and community ditch associations in addition to communities. And so with this funding, it's used for predominantly the legal proceedings and costs with going to court. And with this amendment, it wanted to expand funding to include also after court during the settlement period. However, a disadvantage to it that I noticed in my analysis of it is that it didn't include a financial appropriation, which means that without extra funds or funding, this could mean limited funding in the future for acequia communities in their fight for water rights. And so with House Bill 194, it was sponsored by Cristina Ortiz, who was the House representative, or is the House representative of District 42, which is in northern New Mexico in Taos County area. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit so we can see this better. And so I talked about acequias being around in New Mexico for over 400 years, but in addition to that lengthy history, there's also just a high presence of them throughout the state. There's nearly 700 acequias throughout the state of New Mexico, which makes them really important for the region. However, despite this lengthy history of them being ongoing as part of the culture and legacy in New Mexico, and this high presence of them throughout the state, many communities and associations still do not have their water rights recognized, as Santiago was mentioning earlier. So with House Bill 194, I believe that this amendment was centered on improving food security, enhancing social justice, promoting cultural preservation for Acequia communities, also centered on community empowerment, water is life, el agua es vida, water rights, of course, financial support, and resilience for families of New Mexico. And then for the current status on this amendment, unfortunately, it was withdrawn at the start of March of this year. However, in its process, it was recommended to pass by two committees. It was the House Agriculture, Water and Wildlife Committee, and then also the State Government Elections and Indian Affairs Committee. However, at this time, it's been withdrawn and unclear if it's going to reappear, but hopefully it will at some point. And let's see. Just some final thoughts of my analysis of this bill is that the whole intention behind this House bill is to expand access to financial support, both during and after legal proceedings, to ensure that communities are able to access court proceedings, and but then also have the support after court proceedings to ensure that the settlements are follow through as they should. However, there is a possibility for limited funding in the future if there's not additional funding factored into this bill, or this act really. But overall, this amendment would have been a step closer towards equitable water rights for Acequia and community ditch communities and associations, I believe, in New Mexico. And so with some long-term funding for the Acequia Community Ditch Fund, I believe that we could see enduring water culture and traditions, some preservation of this lengthy heritage so that it may continue for another 400 years at least. And then also improved water access, improved food security, and then as Santiago was saying, we want to make sure that we're empowering and encouraging small local farmers and Acequia communities way before we support big corporations or big farms in the state of New Mexico. And most importantly, of course, equitable water rights amongst communities and associations. So just in closing, I think that increasing recognized water rights amongst Acequia communities will allow these communities and their water cultural traditions to preserve and persevere for at least another 400 years. And el agua es vida.
Okay, thank you, Ericka. If everyone wants to give her a round of applause. Your Zoom. Are there any questions for Ericka or any comments?
Yeah, I'd like to add to thank you very much, Ericka. That was an excellent presentation on the efforts by the New Mexico Acequia Association, and in particular the Acequias in Taos and in Papuaque. that that have reached settlements with their local Native American neighbors, brothers and sisters. But in order to implement those settlements, they need funding, and this bill, unfortunately, that had to be put down in this last session will come back. There's one thing that we've learned over the past 400 years, and that's persistence and resilience, and that we never give up. So we'll be back next year. You can count on it.
Okay, I see Linda Lopez's hand up.
Thank you. And I just want to say thank you, Ericka, for your wonderful presentation. And as Santiago mentioned, this will come back. And there's a land grant interim committee. And I know I'm a member of that committee. And we do focus on land grants, but as you know, land grants and Acequias, it works hand in hand. So what this may be is an issue that would be brought in front of the land grant committee also, so that we could have a conversation, and I think even maybe lend support to the bill as it gets reintroduced. And since it's a financial matter, it deals with an existing line item in our state budget. We don't need the governor's blessing on the bill. So it's an opportunity for us to bring it back in again and try it again. So I'm sure that Representative Ortiz will do so. But again, if we can bring this in front of the land grant committee for this coming interim, then I know that there'll be more of us in tune and in line to make sure that we can support both in the House and also in the Senate. So, but congratulations, thank you.
Okay, I will share my screen. So congratulations, Ericka, for completing our Leadership Institute. Again, let's give a round of applause for Ericka. Woo! Okay.
Yay, Ericka.
Our next presenter, we have Ariela Arias. She was born in Ecuador and grew up in Albuquerque, forming a passion for education and sustainable studies as a way to connect with the community and future. This led her into the Institute as she aims to learn and apply her education in a way that promotes sustainable solutions that not only conserve our natural resources, but also cultural traditions and identities alike. So with that being said, Ari, it's all you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to share my screen and get this started. I want to say thank you to everyone who's here. Thank you to Jorge for creating this opportunity. And Lauren, you're awesome. She does a lot of behind the scenes work. So I really want to thank Lauren too. While this gets loaded. So my name is Ariela Arias. While this is loading, I'll just start talking about myself. Okay, perfect. This picture of me is with food that I grew in my garden, and I think this is a good picture of how I am when I'm not at school or work. So that's me. Currently, I'm working as a server. I'm an investor in real estate. That's actually our first house that we bought in the back of that picture. It's our little casita. My educational focus is in education and sustainable studies. I was born in Quito, Ecuador. This is wrong. It says my father's from Quito, but he's from Ibarra, that's how he would say in his accent. But my mom is from Eugene, Oregon. And I was raised in the UNM area, but right now I'm living on the west side. My community influences definitely strongly influenced by my parents, academic parents at UNM. My mom's a Latin American history professor, and my dad is a cultural anthropologist. So that was a lot of our conversations growing up. I was in the dance community and food service community. My community values that I've learned from these people are self-discipline, passion for what you do, advocacy for human rights, education, cultural and environmental preservation, and the beauty in the struggle. So this brings me to the Healthy Food Financing Act. I will refer it as SB 229. To get a good idea about this, I want to show you a little infographic that I've made so we can get a good idea of New Mexico's current food situation. So give me a moment to present this. And all of this information is from Feeding America Research and America's Health Rankings. So currently 315,990 people are struggling with hunger. And that comes out to 1 in 6 New Mexicans, adults, and 1 in 4 children, which puts us at the #1 high children food insecurity rate. 20% live below poverty, with Black, Indigenous, and people of color in the state more likely than whites to earn low income. And this is historically well documented. Diet-related disease is the #1 cause of death in New Mexico, and diet-related disease meaning heart disease, which was responsible for 21% of deaths in 2017, and obesity, which at New Mexico's rate is at 31%. This shows that there's a link between the lack of healthy food affordability and availability in historically marginalized communities and food policy. This results in a health and food crisis. So I'm going to bring us back to my little presentation. Sorry, this should be the longest load time. Perfect. Okay, so another way that we can look at this is that this is a racial justice issue. And this is a quote from our legislator, Angelica Rubio, which is BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color prior to colonization, invented the idea of organic and sustainable, as well as vegan and vegetarian diets. After colonization, BIPOCs not only were stripped of their land, but access to their healthy food. So this brings us into why the Healthy Food Financing Initiative was created. It has a 3-part goal. It's to create a finance program to support healthy food projects that benefit underserved communities, to improve the health of New Mexico by increasing access to healthy food, and lastly, to strengthen local agricultural economy. I want to highlight that this is based on the equitable food-oriented development strategy that's being used in other states. This strategy seeks to use food and agriculture to create economic opportunity, build community assets, pride and power by and with systematically marginalized and exploited communities. And that's a direct quote from the Equitable Food-Oriented Development website. So this is a great infographic from La Semilla, which has been a great resource for me, showing how this would be implemented in our state. So the money would come from the U.S. Treasury's HFFI fund, which is kind of the same initiative happening on a federal level. It was established in the 2014 Farm Bill. It would also be funded from state funds and financial institutions and foundations. And over here at 2, this is the people who are responsible for distributing the funds and the projects, and what programs with the money would actually go to. And 3 to 4 is where we start seeing the money used in community in the form of farmers markets, increase in fresh food availability in grocery stores, community gardening, increased income for small farms and local businesses, and increase in farms. And that leads us to the return on investment. And in my own words, I'd say the return on investment would be a revitalized agricultural marketplace, reduced hunger, and improved community health. Examples of this would be repayment of low interest loans, increased tax revenue, and decrease in child hunger. Now, because the goal of SB is to bring funding to underserved communities, the parameters of who can apply for what projects are very clear. The projects eligible for HFFI is, I should just say SB 229, but building farmers markets, food co-ops, community gardening projects, and mobile food markets. grocery store renovation and construction, which would mean grocery stores have to dedicate 30% of their floor space to perishable food, and increase marketing and promotion access to healthy food that is locally sustainably sourced. And on the other side of this, the applicants have to provide documentation that they'd be able to implement this project, repay loans, become economically self-sustaining. They have to document the plans that they have to promote, like hiring of local residents, using benefits from this. They have to accept benefits from the SNAP program. They have to show their plan to increase the affordability of healthy food for low-income households. And individuals, local businesses, political subdivisions, Indian nations, tribes, pueblos, nonprofit entities are all eligible for the loan or grant. And there will be a preference to projects that are serving low-income communities. So this is a quick look at the history of SB 229. It starts up here. It was assigned to the Senate Tax, Business, and Transportation Committee and the Senate Finance Committee. And it was passed by both in the Senate. It was sent to the House Health and Human Services, and it was passed with recommendations. So where is it in the legislature now? This is another quote from Angelica Rubio, but unfortunately, due to some internal stalling, we ran out of time. However, we never really had opposition on the issue. We're hoping to how to find out how to implement it through the Department of Economic Development without waiting until next January. And this is a quote from the Fiscal Analysis Report, but it's pretty much saying that the funding of $100,000 in SB 377, which is a different bill, would be enough to cover the operating costs. So my understanding is that they have to get the funding through this other bill. So it's just kind of putting a little roadblock on actually bringing this to our community. So my personal take on this is SB 229 addresses the intersection of food policy, racial justice, and generational health disparities. This is a racial justice issue. SB 229 seeks to rectify generations of inequality when it comes to food policy, education, and healthy food availability. At the root of this bill, there's an economic push to help support the underserved communities by creating a stronger and healthier foundation for BIPOCs to grow from. For example, examples of success of SB 229 that I would want to see is BIPOC voices at the front of food policy changes and reconnection with food history and culture. And this is a lot of information, and all of this got me thinking how all of this, affects me personally. So I was thinking about what healthy means and why I don't eat healthy for every meal. And for me, it's scheduling time to grocery shop or cook. Eating out is easier when I'm tired of or coming home from work and I drive past at least 10 fast food restaurants versus just one grocery store. Sometimes I'd rather spend $20 versus $200 at the grocery store for food for the whole family. And I don't know how to shop for fresh produce. And I just want you guys to think about what stops you from eating healthy for every meal. And this brings me to my conclusion and how I see the future of healthy food. In the community, healthy and affordable food will be available for the working class. More farmers markets with accessible times for those who work during weekends. I can never make it to a farmer's market because I work every single weekend, so that would be for me. Cooking education in classrooms for students and any eligible adults, including education on how to use local water responsibly to grow food. Replacement of fast food corporations with community gardens, food banks, and co-ops, and more jobs in agriculture that offer living wages. And lastly, the decrease of healthy food prices. So how would this impact the community in 20 to 30 years? I could see that this bill and this sort of mentality, there would be a decrease in food scarcity for people of all ages and backgrounds. Education policies will create a new generation of cooks who know how to source healthy meals sustainably and locally. Heart disease will hopefully no longer be the #1 cause of death in New Mexico. Healthier people has economic benefits with increased productivity, less time off to work during health issues. Water rights will be strengthened. Local acequias will be used more frequently to produce healthy food and healthy local soil. And New Mexicans will become sustainable in the sense that we produce our own food and don't rely on outside sources. In conclusion, this food scarcity is a problem that has disproportionately affected men and women of color, and the Healthy Food Financing Act attempts to address this disparity by providing direct funding to the sectors of the local economy that need it most to help compete with multi-billion-dollar fast food chains who too frequently earn too much of local New Mexicans' hard-earned money through simple convenience. The solution is a combination of increase in locally sourced food stores, easier to access healthy food preparation classes and education material, and grow local marketing that will help underserved communities live longer and live better. Food is a part of daily life, and we need to use our voices to say that the food options accessible to the working class are inadequate and are causing people in our community to die from unhealthy diets. We demand change in our food policy. And I want to do a special thanks to Senator Gagey Kernan and Representative Angelica Rubio, who responded to me through email and gave me a lot of good information that I presented to you guys. And last Mia, and thank you. Any questions? Thank you guys.
Are there any questions or comments for Ari?
That was amazing. You did so good. What an outstanding presentation. I'm so proud of you.
Wow, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, that was excellent. This is a great resource for our community because those are exactly the things that we want to do. Right on.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I don't know if Representative Rubio wants to go. You've been a champion of this bill for longer than I was part of this bill. So I don't know if you want to give any reflection on that before I chime in.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think your presentation was incredible. I really am very humbled that it was one of the pieces of legislation that that you selected for your project. So it's I'm honored, is all I can say. This past legislative session, we wanted it to be as transformative as possible, and this legislation was one of those pieces. And unfortunately, as you mentioned in your presentation, because of politics and all of that, it was one of those pieces of legislation that got stalled because of time. And otherwise, it would have been signed by the governor. I mean, we were literally just one vote away from it going to the governor. So I know Senator Hamlin might speak to it, but I think there's a lot of work that we can do between now and January that perhaps we don't have to go through that whole process again, but either way, it's something that I will certainly prioritize or continue to prioritize moving forward. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you, Angelica Rubio, for being here. Thank you. And Carrie Hamlin.
Yeah. Thank you, Ari. You know, it's really interesting because you talked about Senator Gay Kerner. One of the things that was really amazing for this particular bill is that it did have bipartisan support, and it was after I presented it in committee that Senator Kernan was like, I'd like to sign on to that, because it was obvious that it was something that was not based on party lines, but it was something that was going to help our communities and help our farming communities. You know, Representative Rubio and I really pushed the impact on Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities just because of the disproportionate funding resources that are available for those communities, and how those communities often have much more challenges when it comes down to financing opportunities to grow healthy food. And so, which was one of the reasons why I was in a position to dedicate some of my junior money. So when you talk about the $100,000 in the second bill, that was demonstrating to the Economic Development Department that there's skin in the game, that there's a commitment to this. And so I don't think it's a done deal yet. I do feel that there are conversations that we can have with economic development, and that we can continue to move this forward. And And I feel that, because of the work that La Semilla Food Center has helped provide both Representative Rubio and I on this, that there are resources there that are just ready to go. And so, and I think Representative Rubio and I both are like very, very grateful for the work from La Semilla, because they've done a lot of footwork on this for many, many years. And it's a good bill and it needs to pass. And so we will continue to rally for it, both in the House and in the Senate. And I think we'll get some stuff done before it becomes an actual official bill, but we'll get some stuff done. So we'll keep you posted. But thank you, Ari.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is great.
Okay, thank you, everyone. And congratulations, Ari, for completing the Spring 21 Leadership Institute. If everyone wants to give a round of applause through Zoom or with your hands.
Ari.
Okay, our next presenter is Laura Lewis. Laura moved from California to attend the University of New Mexico in 2011. Laura is passionate about environmental, food, and hunger issues. She believes that part of a healthy community includes having a healthy relationship with our land and water. She also believes in the acknowledgement of our histories and cultures can lead to further insight toward contemporary community solutions. So with that being said, welcome our Laura Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. My presentation today will be about House Bill 30 of the 2021 regular session, water lease and use effective date. So my name is Laura Lewis. My ancestors have settled in the United States from their home countries of Ireland, France, the Netherlands, and the Philippines, with 4 ancestral history in Spain, Scotland, and Wales. My family settled primarily in California and New Jersey on native Munsee Lenape, Lenni Lenape, Miwok, and Yokuts land. I grew up in the suburbs of the San Francisco East Bay, California, in a town called Danville. I moved to Albuquerque in 2011 to attend the University of New Mexico. In 2015, I completed a Bachelor of Arts in Languages and a certificate in National Security and Strategic Analysis. In 2020, I continued on to complete a certificate for dietary management at Central New Mexico Community College. I am currently serving as an AmeriCorps service member as a Food Corps food and garden educator at South Valley Preparatory School in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm interested in continuing to promote environmental protections, agricultural methods, and local food access to youth through educational experiences and emphasizing historical and cultural connections to resource use. My communities start with the groups I have participated in: church, youth choir, theater club, conservation work ethics, efforts with Rocky Mountain Youth Corps and the New Mexico Volunteers for the Outdoors. It includes places of learning like UNM, libraries, and farms. It's also camping and climbing locations alongside mountain and desert plants and animals. So I go into my analysis with these perspectives in mind. And again, my analysis is for House Bill 30, water lease and use effective dates. This bill is written to reinforce the current laws requiring the office of the state engineer to allow appeals for water leases before approving the lease. Since water rights are considered a property right under the state and federal laws, the bill was written to ensure due process of the law for all water rights owners. Sponsors of this bill were Representative Kristen Gandler, Senator Peter Wirth, Senator Leo Jaramillo, and Representative Christine Ortega. The basic process, as written in section 72-6-6, looks like this. A request for the water use lease is submitted to the office of the state engineer. Other water rights owners have a period of time to submit an appeal or protest to the state engineer regarding the new lease. A rejection should occur if there would be impairment of existing water rights or if it would be contrary to conservation of water within the state, or if it would be detrimental to the public welfare of the state. After all submitted appeals are reviewed, investigated, and resolved, the water lease may be approved and use may begin. So those are the 3 steps that the law says is the process for these water lease applications. However, according to the New Mexico Acequia Association's Acequia Governance Handbook, the state engineer generally only makes a superficial analysis of public welfare issues in reaching a decision. So the 3rd criteria for whether it should or should not be approved. The written decisions rarely show how much thoughtful consideration of impacts to acequias or other important socioeconomic or cultural impacts of water transfers. So currently, this is the process that the state and the Office of the State Engineer is following. It skips the appeal process to allow for water use via a preliminary water use lease. As water is being used by the new preliminary lease, appeals can still be submitted, but the impact may have already occurred. And there were hours of discussion about HB 30. Those in support of HB 30 are primarily representing the Acequia associations and individual water rights owners. Their main arguments are that this bill would reinforce accountability for the Office of the State Engineer and ensure due process of the law for all water rights owners. Also, that industry should engage in water planning, since small farms and individuals do all as well in order to meet their project needs. For those against HB 30, they are primarily lobbyists for large industries in oil, gas, mining, and technology, as well as the Office of the State Engineer. Industries argue that the enforcement of the law would affect efficiency and workflow due to some projects needing more immediate water use and the potential of the appeal process extending projects by years. The state engineer argues that by following their current process, due to no appeals are submitted after the preliminary lease is granted. This is attributed to investigations done by the state engineer while reviewing the lease request. The fiscal impact report addresses any budget needed for implementation of the bill. And since this is a bill amendment, there has been no projected budget. However, it does raise concerns regarding potential financial impact to industry and state-funded projects through potential delays if the bill is passed, and the potential effects to due process for water rights owners if the bill is not passed. All of these are potential risks. However, HB 30 was withdrawn from the legislative process due to discussions leading away from the original purpose of the bill to reinforce the written process. So in my perspective of this issue, there are about 700 acequias and thousands of water rights owners, and each water right is considered a property right under state and federal statutes. So I believe that each owner should have an opportunity to protect their water rights through the correct and mandated due process procedures. As stated before, this process of the application, appeal, and approval process has been replaced with an unsanctioned preliminary approval process. But it's stated that no water lease application may be approved if it may be detrimental to other water right owners' water use, or detrimental to the conservation of water for the state, or to the public welfare of the state. So without that appeal process, how can we really measure if that is occurring or not? So this means that the withdrawal of the bill impacts due process for all water rights owners, whether individual, small farmer, or large industry. Moreover, some water leases are submitted within a Acequia Association's jurisdiction. So if the state engineer rules on these requests, it's imposing on these Acequia Associations authority to approve water lease transfer applications within their own realm of jurisdiction. Moreover, it's been legislatively noted that a potential water shortage crisis currently exists in the Pecos River. And in order to fulfill water contracts to the state citizens and to Texas contracts, the conservation of water is an important priority for the state. Despite this declared priority for water conservation, versions of HB 30 have been through the legislative process for many years. Failing to pass this bill fails the legislature's recognized priority for water conservation by overlooking the state engineer's preliminary lease approval process and ignoring the right to due process for concerned water rights owners. Instead, this shows that the legislator's priority is not with water concerns, but with financial prospects and industry concerns of speedy and efficient business flow without following mandated processes. And water is essential to everyone. Water is life. In New Mexico, the Acequia has been a place to gather as neighbors for community and collaboration. The conservation of our water depends on all water rights owners, industry, small business, and individuals coming together to collaborate before any potential impacts to others may occur. This can be through discussions and proper water planning. That process can be effectively done by enforcing the currently mandated water lease application process for the Office of the State Engineer, as HB 30 has aimed to do. So thank you so much, and I appreciate you all being here today.
Okay, thank you, Laura. Are there any questions or comments for Laura?
Thank you very much, Laura. That was very well done.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Laura. And congratulations. Thank you for doing the Leadership Institute. You've successfully completed it. So everyone, another round of applause for Laura.
If I could comment further on Laura's presentation. Yeah, we were very disappointed in the Speaker of the House, Brian Eakoff. Basically, he forced the sponsors to allow an amendment written by the state engineer that was a poison pill to the bill. So ultimately, we had to withdraw it. But we won't. But not all is lost. District Judge Romero down in the Southern District has ruled that the state engineer has violated this act, and it's currently once again on appeal to the Court of Appeals. But although the next legislative session won't include bills of substance like this, other than budget bills, I think we at least have another year or two to address this issue. Thank you very much. It was a great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Santiago. So I will introduce our next intern, and we have Alicia Gallegos. Alicia is an undergraduate student at UNM, majoring in Family and Child Studies and is minoring in Native American Studies. Taking pride in her mixed identity as a Pueblo, Chicana, and Dene woman, Alicia strives to give back to the community she comes from through her education. Her studies focus on the ways in which colonialism impacts the livelihoods and well-beings of people of color and identifies ways healing can take place while also being culturally relevant. Alicia's interest in participating in our Leadership Institute arises from the opportunity to learn from and work with the local community, all while also learning about the connectiveness of land, water, traditions, and cultures. So with that being said, welcome Alicia Gallegos.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm so grateful to be here. So, Watsi hopa watu shinume yawaitsi ese hapa ni hanu sta shashka washji sta So hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I am calling in here from Tira Territory, and I will be doing an analysis of House Bill 50. Oh, sorry. To give a little bit of background on myself, I just completed my second year at the University of New Mexico this past spring semester, and am now a junior majoring in family and child studies and concentrating in human development and family relations, and also double minoring in Native American studies and psychology. So in the beginning, I introduced myself in my native language, which is Perez. I am from the pueblos of Acoma and Laguna, and my clans are Big Oak and Little Roadrunner. I am also Dene and Chicana. I am born and raised from here in Albuquerque and Rio Rancho, New Mexico. So to get into the analysis, my bill is HB 50, which is the private right of action for certain statutes. I will go in later and to provide some more a breakdown of what that means. But beforehand, I want to give a little bit of context on the bill. The sponsor is Georgian Lewis. She is part of the Democratic Party and has been a Bernalillo County representative since 2013. Here's a picture of her on the left. This bill was assigned to two committees, which were the House Energy, Environment, and Natural Resources Committee and the Judiciary Committee. To further break down this bill, I provided an excerpt from the Fiscal Impact Report, which states, House Bill 50 proposes to create a private right of action for persons pursuing the enforcement of the Oil and Gas Act, Air Quality Act, Hazardous Waste Act, Solid Waste Act, and Water Quality Act. Persons who are injured or imminently threatened with injury, economically or otherwise, would be able to commence civil action on the person's own behalf against another person who is subjected to or regulated by one of these acts. So to kind of give a summary and some more simple language of what this bill was proposing is, this bill would allow a citizen affected by pollution the right to pursue a person or community subject to the alleged violation. It would also authorize district courts to order the person or company to stop polluting. This bill also further states that no judgment can be made unless the court has determined that the resolution is fair, reasonable, in the public interest, and furthers the goals of said acts. However, this bill also implies that New Mexicans would have to continue to be reliant on state agencies to enforce environmental laws. As for the fiscal implications, there were no fiscal implications, which means it would not cost the state anything. However, if there were any penalties to be collected, they would be deposited in the state treasury and credited to the appropriate state fund, which are listed here as the general fund, which is oil and gas, hazardous waste emergency fund, solid waste facility grant fund, and the water quality grant fund. So when the bill first went to the House Energy and Natural Resource Committee, it did pass on January 28th. There was a 6-5 vote. And as you can see here from the table, the people who voted against this bill were from the Republican Party. So after this, it moved on to the Judiciary Committee, where it did not pass. There was a 7-4 vote. And again, if you look at the table, the people who voted against this bill were Republican members. In the end, this bill unfortunately did not pass. So I want to talk a little bit about what does this mean to me. To me, this was a step towards protecting New Mexicans from big corporations, which are notorious for exploiting natural resources and polluting surrounding areas, which often leave locals with the burden of poor air quality, contaminated water, and just overall poor health. I do believe this bill could be improved by taking more of a restorative justice approach to ensure that real change is actually being implemented in the communities that are impacted by pollution. Because it is one thing for a person to take a company to court, but how can we make sure that these atrocities are not to be repeated ever again? And how can we ensure the longevity of our natural resources and improve upon the health of our local communities? When thinking about this bill, we need to be thinking about how our decisions today will impact the future state of our planet and the generations that will be inhabiting it. To provide you with a little bit of data, I gathered a quote here from the Environmental Defense Fund, which states, new analysis estimates that New Mexico's oil and gas companies emit over 1.1 million metric tons of methane annually. That's approximately 5 times more pollution than EPA data suggests, and has the same near-term climate impact as 25 coal-fired power plants. And this data was collected in 2020, which is very, very recent. And these are real consequences that impact all of us, but especially those who are BIPOC folks and live in low-income communities. In conclusion, I think that protecting New Mexico and its citizens from pollution means honoring Indigenous sovereignty, as they are one of the main populations that are impacted by pollution in our state and in just worldwide. It also would mean prioritizing the health and safety of our Mother Earth and our local citizens over monetary gain and capitalism. So I hope to see a bill similar to this come back in the future that keeps in mind our future generations and the future health of our planet, and that also, you know, has more appropriate actions that protect our citizens here in New Mexico. Dawae, thank you, everyone. Are there any questions or comments?
Alicia, I just want to say thank you for your analysis and thank you for presenting this bill. I think this is a clear example of how big money, big corporations ended up determining the well-being of the people of the state, not only here in New Mexico, but in other states. And as Senator Linda and myself had a little exchange, you know, we have to, in order to be able to stop the imminent consequences of climate change and drought, our consciousness needs to think, and so we have to really put local people before we put the interests of the big money that at the end of the day, a lot of it goes out somewhere, headquarters in other places, and so New Mexicans don't even ended up benefiting really from all this extraction of natural resources and these very corrupt practices that ended up buying. I understand that a lot of people depend on some of these industries, but we have to weigh the benefits versus the effects that it's having on our health, our climate, our water, and the overall quality of life that the local citizens have. So thank you very much. That was an excellent presentation, Alicia. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge.
Okay, are there any other comments or questions?
I think I saw Santiago.
Yeah, I'd like to add something to that. We've been a participant with Tiwa Women's United and Amigos Bravos in the a suit for against pollution that Los Alamos has been draining into our, into the watershed through the Santa Clara Pueblo and into the Rio Grande. Students from South Valley Academy years ago testified at the state hearings on water quality regarding the Rio Grande. There was an effort to downgrade its status in terms of water quality. And they were able to change that or to stop that policy from being changed, the conditions lowered with their testimony. And I think that the work that you have done this year is really great. The next step is when these issues come up in the legislature, you as citizens have the right to comment on these bills when they go before committee. And this year, many of us were given opportunities to make comments, and that has a great effect on our legislators and our policymakers, that the next generation is also concerned with these issues.
Okay, and with that being said, congratulations, Alicia. Everyone give another round of applause for Alicia for completing our Leadership Institute. Okay, our next presenter, we have Sofia Jenkins Nieto. Sofia was born in Albuquerque and grew up in Denver, Colorado. Her passion for environmental justice has introduced her to a broad range of experiences as a junior at the University of New Mexico. With a major in environmental science and a minor in sustainability studies, Sofia has taken advantage of every opportunity possible in order to expand her knowledge so that she can continue to make a positive impact on the world. She strongly believes that Indigenous knowledge in land and water relations should be prioritized and combined with Western science. So with that being said, go ahead, Sofia.
Hi, everyone. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, awesome. Okay, so yeah, I did House Bill 95, which is titled Water Administration Changes. So a little bit about me. Like Lauren said, my name is Sofia. I just finished my junior year at UNM, majoring in environmental science and minor in sustainability studies. I was born in Albuquerque, but I grew up in Northwest Denver, Colorado, and I'm actually home in Denver right now for my little brother's graduation. So if you hear noise, it's my family. They're all celebrating right now. My family is from Oregon and Colorado and New Mexico, and with strong roots in Las Cruces and Albuquerque. And I have been doing community organizing since I was in high school, and right now I'm on the steering committee for UNM LEAF, which is a climate action group on campus. We were pushing for fossil fuel divestment and a greener campus, carbon neutral. So little plug if you know anyone at UNM, student, staff, faculty, everybody, we want everybody to join LEAF. But yeah, so just to get into the bill, House Bill 95, titled Water Administration Changes, was sponsored by Andrea Romero. The purpose of the bill was to get the Office of the State Engineer to make public the reasoning behind denying or accepting water permit applications that they get, and also to require the OSC to publish both an economic evaluation on water supply and demand and a climate change impact statement over a 40-year period. So they would have to publish the specific findings supporting the approval or denial of an application with all the factual and legal rationale for the decision. And the water rights decision would have to include consideration of drought and climate change and determining whether approval would be contrary to the conservation of water within the state. They would have to also assess the impact on recreational, cultural, and environmental interests, and to determine whether approval will be detrimental to public welfare. So HB 95 passed through the House Energy and Environment and Natural Resources Committee, and then went to the Agriculture and Water Resources Committee. But it didn't pass there. There were some issues, including some conflicts with the New Mexico Constitution, which I'm going to talk about next. So the main concern that was brought up by the New Mexico Department of Transportation was that the proposal could create conflict with the New Mexico Constitution, Article 16, Section 3, which provides beneficial use shall be the basis, the measure, and the limit of the right to the use of water. So HB 95 creates other bases for considering a water use right, and those additional considerations could be interpreted as conflicting with the assessment of beneficial use. So like I said, the bill puts a lot of different stipulations on the water rights decisions, like climate change and social cultural impacts, and that was a main concern. The Office of the State Engineer opposed for many reasons, including the possible delay in processing time for water permits and the fact that making decisions public would take more time. And they had specific concerns about the bill's requirement for looking at groundwater sources, the impact of climate change on groundwater, stating that the bill would amend the statute that governs applications for the appropriation of groundwater, which, unlike surface water, is not directly affected by climate change, and it is therefore unclear why the bill would require findings regarding the impact of climate change on the sustainability or depletion of groundwater sources. So that's just kind of a summary of the bill and what happened to it. This is kind of my take on it. I had specific concerns with that last statement on groundwater. Groundwater is definitely connected to surface water and is affected by climate change. And as climate change worsens, and especially as drought worsens here in New Mexico, will deplete aquifers for more water. And I think it's definitely naive and harmful to completely disregard groundwater and climate change with our water usage. Our water use has to be sustainable, and evaluating what sustainable water use looks like is constantly changing as the climate changes. Water is becoming more and more scarce in New Mexico. So as a state, we need to reevaluate our methodology and the way we use it. Are we using it beneficially? Are we using it equitably? Are we not only considering climate change, but prioritizing those considerations? Climate change is only worsening, and we need to think about adaptation strategies with water administration, and I'm not sure if bills like this are the way to go. I'm really new to learning about water law, especially in New Mexico, but I think it's definitely a priority that lawmakers and government officials need to have. And HB 95 was an attempt to make that happen, at least with new permits, but there were too many conflicts that I think would ultimately hurt the communities and make water rights permit process slower and a lot more complicated. So that is my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sofia.
Are there any comments or questions for Sofia?
This is Representative Rubio. I just wanted to say that that was a really great presentation, Sofia. And yes, water law here in New Mexico is overwhelming, and I can't even imagine how challenging this project might have been for you, but I just want you all to, I just appreciate you all for just working on these issues, that hopefully some of the solutions that have been considered, that you all certainly are working towards improving some of the ideas that are coming out of the legislature, because there's certainly a lot of work to be done. So thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, with that being said, congratulations, Sofia. If everyone wants to give her a round of applause for completing our Leadership Institute. Our next presenter is Ennedith Lopez. Ennedith is a first-generation Chicana who recently graduated from the University of New Mexico with a double major in International Studies and Spanish, and a double minor in Chicano Studies and Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies. During her senior year, she worked as a peer leader at the College Assistance Migrant Program at UNM, providing support for first-generation students from migrant farm worker communities. Born and raised in Albuquerque, Ennedith has found a passion for community and advocacy work, hoping to continue her education and work in the nonprofit sector. Now she has a fellowship with the Institute for Policy Studies and is working on several projects. She likes to enjoy the outdoors, travel, and spend time with family and friends in her free time. So with that being said, go ahead, Ennedith.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me and joining us today. So I am just going. So I analyzed SB 8, local government air quality regulations. And my full name is Ennedith Lopez. My pronouns are she, her, ella. I recently graduated last week from UNM with a BA in International Studies in Spanish. And throughout my undergraduate career, I found an immense interest on several human rights issues, such as immigration and border politics and policies, the impact of the prison industrial complex, gender violence, and kind of the changes that contemporary social movements and grassroots activism strives for and does. I was born and raised in Albuquerque, and I have lived here my whole life. Growing up in the war zone, my community has consisted of people with backgrounds similar to mine, having some form of connection to other parts of the world, being working class, first generation, but most importantly, being resilient despite many of the circumstances they confront. I am proud to be a descendant of Mexican immigrants who come from different parts of Mexico, such as Durango, Chihuahua, specifically Juarez, and Zacatecas. If I'm being quite honest, I do not know much of my ancestral roots, but my grandparents make claims to different heritages, such as one that's say they mention they have Spanish ancestors and others who mention they have indigenous ancestors, but all of them claim mestizaje. And for that reason, I feel a lot more comfortable identifying as a Chicana. Considering that I was born and raised in the United States as a Mexicana, learning traditional healing methods, family recipes, and traditional forms of celebration. And because of that, I have a huge relationship to the desert, hot and spicy foods, and music. So now, the bill that I analyzed was SB 8, Local Air Quality Regulations. It is an environmentally friendly piece of legislation in the interest of reducing air and water pollution and implementing safe practices for the disposal of hazardous waste with guidelines set by the Environmental Improvement Board and the New Mexico Environment Department, which consists of state and local officials. This bill aims to address the gaps found in the Federal Clean Act, since it is a broad piece of legislation that may not directly support the unique environmental conditions in the state of New Mexico. As I read and I understood from this piece, I kind of picked out 4 important elements that I thought I should analyze here. One is kind of looking at the impact of the Federal Clean Act, considering since it is a broad piece, it's being used as kind of like a basis for the regulation. But the SB 8 is kind of looking to allow for more stricter regulation depending on the local needs. Second, kind of like removing the language from the Hazardous Waste Act or NMSA 1978 and establishing more protocols for safe disposal of toxic waste. Commonly, these 2 aspects of the bill use federal standards as somewhat a starting point, but depending on local conditions and needs, and the reduction of gas emissions and disposal of hazardous waste, standards could be stricter depending on that. The bill points out that the NMSA 1978 is a statute which has limiting language to fully locally based language that could be solved by locally based solutions. So that it kind of aims to amend and repeal certain parts of it. Lastly, the Environmental Improvement Board and the New Mexico Environment Department are responsible for developing stricter regulations as needed. And this consists of, as I mentioned before, state and local officials. So essentially the main argument in support of this bill is the need to implement stricter regulations and protocols because the Federal Clean Act is too broad. In the end, there were 4 sponsors for this bill: Representative Christine Chandler, Senator Linda M. Lopez, Representative Nathan Small, and Senator P. Worth. After reading a few articles, I understood that the strongest opposition was from Republican and some Democratic members who were concerned for the impact this may have on business and kind of the ability to attract other industries in the state of New Mexico. They argue that the federal regulations are sufficient. And in the end, this bill was passed on April 8th. And it did have to go through several changes depending on the recommendations implemented by multiple communities. And at one point it was stalled for quite a bit. So the report conducted by the New Mexico Environment Department found that there would be no additional costs and no fiscal impacts on the agency, as there would be no additional new responsibilities, meaning that they don't need additional resources. It reports that the federal regulations do not address all sources and pollutants that affect air quality and water in New Mexico. The bill would give EIB the ability to develop new rules unique to the state circumstances in regard to hazardous waste and air pollutants, and including dangerous chemicals found in our groundwater. And this combats toxic pollutants suspected of causing cancer and other health effects, including visibility, impairing pollutants that come from wildfires or fuel burning, and those that impact the view of the natural landscape. This would provide more assurance in transportation, treatment, and disposal of hazardous waste that is not currently regulated by the federal government. And MED would be able to develop those rules, and this would essentially improve the air quality and water in the state. And as mentioned before earlier, the concern was that if not passed, we would be limited by the federal government. And the main concern was kind of like those changes that were seen in the past administration when it came to environmental policy. So addressing that need and implementing something that was a lot more consistent. So in significance, I think this bill is definitely a step in the right direction. The state of New Mexico largely economically depends on the oil and gas industry, but it is important to recognize how that negatively impacts our earth, lands, water, people, and communities. We must not put profit over the well-being of ourselves and our people and our land. Based on the arguments, attempting to fill in the gaps that the federal law lacks in regard to New Mexico's unique conditions is a model for more community sourced and locally based legislations. This leaves room for the incorporation of traditional or local ways of knowledge and recommendations of people who actually live in that region and who are actually impacted and affected by environmental policies. We must value those perspectives as well. I understand that the concern that this may impact business, but as I have learned throughout my involvement with CESOSS, we should value the concerns and look at different ways to welcome business in a manner that does not negatively hurt the environment, state, or its residents. Bills such as SB 8 are important because it is an intentional step towards our future. We have corporations coming in, like such as Amazon or Netflix, or that dependency on the oil and gas industry. And we must make sure that if they do want to be here, they must respect the land and its resources. In the long run, the elements of this bill may help reduce gas emissions and protect actually our groundwater. New Mexico will be doing its part in ensuring the impact of climate change does not reach a point of no return. This land, its water, and its people deserve to be respected and protected, and politicians should stop treating that as a matter of negotiation. So I would like to thank all of you for being here. Are there any questions or comments?
Just want to say thank you, Ennedith. That was a great presentation.
And if I may say also, this was a wonderful presentation. Your analysis was right on, Ennedith, and this legislation, to me, for the work that many of our communities across the state have needed some help. And you rightly pointed out with the last federal administration, they decimated a lot of our environmental, the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act. They just decimated in so many different ways. And what this bill will do also is help many of our communities so that we can set with local government also a higher standards that will help our people. And for us here in Bernalillo County, this, I believe, will help with the air quality board that we do have. It's between both city government and the county of Bernalillo that can help many of our communities in the South Valley with a lot of the air quality issues. And of course, we all have water issues in the state. Mora has issues with their landfill on issues that they've been fighting that over many years. We have the recent one here in Rio Rancho where they were dumping again some inappropriate, I think nuclear-based, kind of that threshold for me of what they were dumping, and down in Mesquite, down in southern New Mexico, and others too. There's been a lot of issues in local government, and the Environmental Improvement Board now have an opportunity to set the standards at a higher level that I know that can help to, how should I say, protect our communities for the future. So I just thank you. Your analysis was right on point, and congratulations.
Okay. And congratulations, Ennedith, like another round of applause for completing our Leadership Institute. Okay, our next presenter is Naljahih. Hannah is a sophomore currently studying criminology and psychology at UNM. She plans to further her education in law to represent and protect diverse communities. She joined our Leadership Institute to understand activist methods, to better understand policies and rights of the land and society. Hannah was raised on the Navajo Reservation and is of the many Govt clan people and born for the Bitterwater clan people, and is descendant of the Kiowa tribe of Oklahoma. So go ahead, Hannah.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay. Yat eshik dosh dine Hannah Naljahih nishya. Is this line initially Twitter cheatney bashishi Kaiwa dashiche ki ani dashinale? Hello everyone. I'm glad everyone could make this. I will be speaking in benefits of environmental justice for the future. Okay, so I am double majoring in criminology and psychology. I will be a junior this upcoming fall. I was born and raised in Jamestown, New Mexico, in my late grandparents' home. My community is the Navajo Nation Reservation. So the top picture is of my paternal grandparents, my Shanela Adzan, Mary Lou Naljahih, Woyek Nit Do, Shanela Hastine, Albert Senior Naljahih, Woyek Nit. My paternal grandparents are my Shamasane Mary Helen Krima Woyek Nit Do, Shiche Alice Jean Tapta Woyek Nit. There are 4 clans make up my clans. So I'm originally from Talani Lake. It is on the western tip of the Navajo Reservation. It is close to our sacred mountain, Toko Oslid, which means the summit that never melts. So my bill is Senate Bill number 296. It was proposed on February 18, 2021. So the sponsors are Senator Brenda McKenna. She is from Nambe, and her word says she will defend our values in order to protect our schools, our health, our community, and our sense of decency. And our other sponsor, Senator Jeff Stainborn, he is from Las Cruces, and in his words, he says, I am committed to protecting the best of New Mexico and creating a strong future for our children. As leaders, the sponsors support this because of their passion for environmental justice. So my bill is to increase the maximum civil penalties for violations, non-compliance, and failure to correct non-compliance related to agencies in New Mexico to account for inflation. So this means that there needs to be a financial adjustment in the law because companies are not complying with the law. So accounting for inflation means the value of the money are declining by roughly 50%. The responses are the Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department and New Mexico Environmental Department. These departments have authority to penalize these violations. The agencies involved are the New Mexico Mining Act, Air Quality Control Act, the Water Quality Act, the Hazardous Waste Act, and the Solid Waste Act. These companies in these agencies are to ensure the companies adhere to the regulations, like such as the Navajo refineries and the federal government. So these, this money, on the left is the current amount that they are paying for each violation per day, and the bill that, and the amount next to it is double the currency that they are paying now. So that is the proposed amount for each violation. So this bill did not pass. In the legislative process, the bill was referred to pass by the Conversation Committee, and then it was referred to Judiciary Committee, but it didn't get past that. Okay. So the current amount really does not serve as a deterrent to bad actors, meaning which the rates proposed would be the ceiling rates. The ceiling rates are the maximum interest rates permitted in this particular transaction in the bill. If this bill is taken to court, then the judge will decide up to the limit, the appropriate amount and the ability for the offender to pay. So the money that is collected will go into the Hazardous Waste Emergency Fund, the Solid Waste Facility Grant Fund, and the General Fund. The money will enhance the New Mexico's state budget and collecting higher penalty amounts. 6 people supported this and 2 were against it. So I related this to my reservation. So between 1947 and 1986, 4 million tons of uranium was extracted for the United States government to make nuclear weapons. As the Cold War threat faded, companies left and they abandoned all these mines, which is in the picture. Over 500 abandoned mines, 4 inactive milling sites, a former dump site, contaminated groundwater, structures that may contain elevated levels of radiation. Although mining did offer Navajo men jobs, there is no safety precautions for protection from the mines and the radiation. They were like, the Navajo men were drinking the water when they were working and they were unaware of it. So Maria Welch is a Navajo field researcher whose family was exposed to uranium. She said her parents grew up next to mines and they would swim and they would play in contaminated water. And families would let their livestock drink from the contaminated water unwittingly. So there's a disaster in Church Rock in 1979. This sent 100 tons of radioactive male waste liquid pouring towards Arizona into the rivers, and the Navajos still cannot drink from this water. So the diseases linked to this exposure is the chronic kidney disease, and this disease, the risk factor is diabetes, and 45% of Navajos have diabetes. And cancer, 2 different kinds of cancer you can get from exposure is lung cancer and bone cancer. What is being done by this is the Environmental Protection Agency consulted with the Navajo Nation government to create a 5-year plan to clean up mines and contaminated structures, to test waters, to provide assistance to affected residents. But the Navajo Nation, they cleaned it up, but they didn't really the Navajo Nation claimed that EPA did not do an adequate job and filed a lawsuit. A Navajo man said, a high priority needs to be placed on and cleanup efforts for the Navajo Nation because they are not responsible for this environmental disaster. And we are not, we were not. Okay, so the importance. So why is this bill important? This bill is to create a strong deterrent, and this will encourage compliance with laws and regulations. Improve compliance with environmental regulations benefits to states' natural resources and public health, and to protect human health. The bill will correct this reduction in the value of the penalties by doubling the penalty amount in statute. All living things depend on a clean and healthy environment. And this bill, and a bill like this will actually make a difference. And it starts here so we can recover our earth. With that said, we are the future, we are of nature. By a quote by Edward Johnson Little, we are of nature, we are nature, we come from nature, and we go back to nature. The water and land are essential to life. Water is life. So our responsibility to protect our environment, we need to protect our land, we need to protect our water, our sacred grounds, our ancient traditional dwellings, the spiritual places people go to pray, our heaven on earth, our ground. With this area damaged, then how are we supposed to keep our traditions going? We are captured by our society, the capitalist society that seems to take over our culture, our traditions, and our values. We come so far as Native people, but it does not stop here. We must become aware of these issues and remain focused that we can change things. We need to put our minds together as one to get our justice, to protect our future, our land, our children, our families, and our culture. We must keep fighting because we are strong, we are resilient, and we are indigenous. Yeah, thank you.
That was excellent, Hannah. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Lauren, this is Brenda McKenna. Can I say a few words to Hannah and the group?
Of course.
Hannah Kuntawoha, that was very well done. I want you to know, and others on in the room today, that Senator Steinborn and I fully intend to promote this legislation again. We'll even ask for the governor to put it on her call next year. As you know, next year is the short session, and so usually it's reserved for budgetary issues, but it never hurts to ask our governor to have such legislation on the call. And Hannah, really good job. I was really impressed with all the facts that we shared with you and how you put them into your presentation, and then reflected it on the Dene people and our ancient lands. And like you, I believe we have to respect everything around us, right? Respect our air, respect our water. That's where we come from. So I loved even respecting our rocks. I have a great honor for stones and rocks, and I'm amazed at all the sentient beings that we share this earth with. And so with that, really good job, Hannah, and really pleased that the legislation that Senator Steinborn and I supported resonated with you. Thank you. Kuntawoha.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Okay, thank you. And after such a beautiful presentation, congratulations, Hannah. You've completed our Leadership Institute. So if everyone wants to give a round of applause.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hannah. And then last but not least, our last presentation is Michelle Perez. Michelle has a passion to serve marginalized communities and groups affected by institutionalized racism in the United States. She believes in actively listening to community members' testimonies, opinions, feelings, thoughts, and ideas because she understands that oftentimes outsiders make decisions that do not reflect the needs or wants of vulnerable communities. Michelle earned her Bachelor's of Science degree in City and Regional Planning at Cal Poly Panama. She is a first generation college student now transitioning into UNM's MCRP program. Michelle yearns to meaningfully engage with Albuquerque for as long as she has the privilege to. Her overall goal with CESOSS was to learn, contribute, and build leadership skills. So with that being said, go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you for the introduction, Lauren. I will share my screen. Thank you everyone for joining the Zoom today. My name is Michelle Perez. My pronouns are she, her, they, them. I earned my Bachelor's of Science in Urban and Regional Planning at Cal Poly Pomona last year. And I'm currently pursuing my master's degree here at UNM in Community and Regional Planning. I wanted a more in-depth study of city and community regional planning. And I just finished my first semester here at UNM. I'm originally from the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles, California. I want to share a little bit about my community. So I come from a family and community of hard workers, street vendors, social workers, activists, and community organizers. My entire family was born and raised in Mexico. I am the first one to start my life here in the United States. My mom was born in Guadalajara, Mexico, and my dad in el estado de Hidalgo. Buenas tardes, gracias. This community taught me to advocate for love, acceptance, social justice, to not be complicit and silent, and to, practice anti-racism, anti-homophobia, anti-capitalism, anti-imperialism, and dismantling the patriarchy that we have in society. This includes fighting against the prison industrial complex. My analysis of HB 40, House Bill 40, the Private Detention Facility Moratorium Act, I'll go into depth. So I created a glossary. So I just want to go over a few terms. So moratorium, temporarily removing something, and then a private detention facility, a private prison, or a for-private prison is essentially a third party, a commercial business that is contracted by the government agency, the city or the county. And this government agency agrees to pay the prison for each bed within the facility, even if there isn't an individual to fill the bed. And then the larger definition I want to bring to everyone's attention is the prison industrial complex. It's a term that we use to describe the overlapping interests of government and industry that use surveillance, policing, and imprisonment as solutions to economic, social, and political problems. The prison industrial complex, it helps and maintains the authority of people who get their power through racial, economic, or other privileges. So the original text of House Bill 40, it deems it unlawful for any government agency to renew a contract with a private prison or a privately owned ICE detention facility. And this also excludes, under HB 40, it will not give permission to state or local governmental entities, county sheriffs, police officers, or government employees or agents, again, from entering or renewing a contract in agreement with renewing a private prison or even increasing the capacity of the existing ones. And I want to thank the sponsors of HB 40. Representative Rubio left a little earlier. However, I'm grateful for all the representatives and senators who supported HB 40, and especially the Democratic Party currently in the House and Senate. I want to show a map of the private prison population, and the largest density of populations is in Montana and New Mexico. So in Montana, there's only one private prison, but here in Nuevo Mexico, there's about, let me pull it up. Sorry about that. So there is 4 private prisons and 3 privately managed ICE detention facilities. And here's a map just to show geographically. So Chibola, Torrance, Guadalupe, Otero, and Lea County. And here are the privately managed managers. So Core Civic, Geo Group, MTC, Management and Training Corporation. So the supporters of House Bill 40, there are more than a dozen supporters. A few of them is the ACLU New Mexico, Millions for Prisoners New Mexico, Prison Divestment Coalition New Mexico, and also People Over Private Prisons New Mexico. The executive director of the ACLU New Mexico, Peter Simons, he did share his description on why he did supports House Bill 40, which is that New Mexico has an addiction to privately managed prisons. The state reinforced the system where private prisons are a quasi-governmental facility because they carry out a government function. However, when the public tries to investigate information about the quality of healthcare or housing in the private facilities, it's denied. So private prisons have become untouchable because of the state's public records laws. And Peter believes that the worst influence under private prisons in New Mexico is the incentivization to incarcerate people to pay private prison shareholders more money. Those in opposition of House Bill 40, of course, the privately managed managers, so Core Civic, Geo Group, and the Management and Training Corporation, some leadership in Otero County because they're a little worried about paying back the bonds that they used to build the private facility in Chaparro. Sorry. And also the privately owned ICE detention facility. However, my counter argument for that is that these headquarters for Core Civic, Geo Group, and the Management and Training Corporation, they are not in New Mexico. So we see here Montana and New Mexico where they have the highest private prison population. Theoretically, if their argument is based on money, they can't even argue that the money is circulating within the state that they are serving. Their headquarters is in Florida, Tennessee, and Utah. With the help of People Over Private Prisons, my fiscal analysis report is essentially based on the year 2018, where we see that the average cost per inmate per day was $111, and for the year, $4,515. However, an alternative to private prisons was brought up through the fact that 1.5 of New Mexico's private prison populations are nonviolent drug offenders. So if we implement alternatives to detention for this population of nonviolent offenders, it would greatly ease the overall number of inmates, and it will reduce the incarceration cost, and it will make the transition away from costly private prisons easier for New Mexico without placing the public at risk. And also the state would save $39,000 and $55,000. My personal take is to end private prisons here in New Mexico, just because of that system where there's an incentive to incarcerate people. And there's an incentive to keep folks that are eligible for release incarcerated. With the aspects that we learned about social justice, again, this is a system in place that blocks restorative justice, and that methodology. So I really challenge New Mexico to end private prisons here. And a future without private prisons. So here's that map that I showed earlier. Essentially, one day, not have private prisons nationwide either, and ending the prison industrial complex. Oftentimes we hear the term modern day slavery. So the prison labor supply, they force the folks in there to work. And if they don't work, then they face consequences. And of course, this is happening in private prisons. So under HB 40, they're asking for a transition of privately held folks that are incarcerated to transition to a state prison. And also, I want to also share that the employees at state prisons are trained 58 hours more than employees trained at private prisons. And also, my last kind of note is just people over profit. So really, focusing on community services such as schools and libraries, arts and culture, youth support, housing and shelter, health clinics, and things like that. I currently work at the Albuquerque Housing Authority. So I'm very grateful for CESOSS because they've allowed me to practice my intersectionality lens created by Kimberly Campbell. So thank you, CESOSS, for allowing me to just piece all these puzzles and to make sure that I'm doing the research and I'm staying up to date and I'm able to share it with the community. Thank you. If there's any questions, please let me know.
Okay, is there any questions or comments for Michelle?
I like to comment. What a wonderful presentation, no? And what a sad state of affairs when it comes to again. No, I think we almost go back to the same thing. No, and you said it very well in your last slide. Profit over people. No, that's a shame. That's a shame that our entire society has moved to benefit corporations. Benefiting corporations instead of helping citizens, no? And so so one thing is the greed and the corruption that all of that creates, but the other thing is that a lot of these young men, they're also part of our future, no? And so a lot of them are small offenders who probably, doesn't really merit being incarcerated and turning their lives upside down when we could actually be doing a better job to help them to change their course. And instead of spending so much money that goes out to other states and to these big corporations, can you imagine if we would use that money to actually invest in these young men to get a different way of life? That will be an investment that will probably take us much farther into the future than actually creating these cycles of violence and incarceration that in all reality destroys families, no? One time I was in Ecuador in an indigenous community, and an elder told me, he says, listen, we don't have prisons. He says, we don't do that. If anything happens in this community, we'll bring that person in front of the community and we'll fix it right here, right then. It says, and the rationale is because when we take that person away from the family, who suffers? The family, no? So we have become not only a very greedy, but very inhumane society, that we don't, some way, somehow, and I think that the politics from the last regime really attest to their loss of values and really valuing people who cheat and lie and offend and really awful. So I'm personally very grateful to the senators and the representatives who maintain those values, because without that, I don't know what kind of society we actually will live in. No? So I say thank you, Michelle, and I'm so touched by your presentation and all the presentation that I extend also my gratitude to the senators and the representatives who are fighting for us day in, day out. Thank you, Michelle. That was beautiful.
Are there any
I'd like to
other-
add one last thing, and that is, well, maybe not the last, but one more thing.
Yeah, here in the South Valley, La Placita Institute, one of our partners, have operate a farm to redirect youth to use the resources that we have, as well as counseling and providing a spiritual support. La Cultura Cura. They've recently received a large grant from the Ann Casey Foundation to try to assist both our courts and juvenile justice professionals, as well as all the other nonprofits and community organizations that are trying to help our youth redirect their those that are on that school to prison pipeline. So we're working on it here in our community, and I think La Placita is taking a lead on that.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. And last but not least, congratulations, Michelle. Another round of applause for completing our Leadership Institute. We're so proud of everyone. This is a great set of presentations. But I would just like to pass it to Jorge, our director, to see if he has any final comments.
Well, I would like to, before I say my final words, I would like to pass it on to Santiago and Alicia is still there, if they would like to say final words.
Bueno, we're experiencing this drought, but it's really a climate change, and this may be the new normal that we're living under. So we have to learn to adapt. Part of that is also addressing the issues of unbridled development and sprawl. Santolina is still trying to reverse the Supreme Court decision on zoning, and also they are applying for a 600-acre tire dump up on the lands of the Atrisco land grant that they've obtained through the bankruptcy of SunCal. And a hearing will be held Tuesday with the County Planning Commission at 9 a.m. It's streamed, and hopefully we may be able to make comments. There was 2 articles in today's journal regarding this issue, as well as the 9,000 acres that they still want to develop with housing and commercial buildings. So those issues are still on the burner. We had a minor victory with the Supreme Court overruling the county commission's approval of the zoning for planned communities, but the battle is not over. So please join us on Tuesday, and you can link to the streaming through the Bernalillo County website. We'll have the information necessary for you to link. Bueno, que siga la batalla.
Siga la batalla.
I just want to say great job, everyone. We are so proud of you, as you can tell by the comments and the people in this room. What you have shared with us, what you're learning is so important for our communities, for the land, for the water, and for life, right? It's about survival. That's what we're trying to do. And so thank you again. And just like Linda Lopez said, we are in good hands with your leadership.
Muy bien. Pues thank you, Alicia. Thank you, Santiago. Thank you, everybody. Again, this is so fulfilling. It makes me feel so proud and so humble, no? And I also want to acknowledge Lauren. Lauren was one of our interns at some point, and she's now a collaborator, and it made me think, no, it made me think how we have to change that saying, you know, that behind every man there's a woman or something like that, no? Which I think is really ridiculous. And I will say that in front of a decent man, there is always a great woman also. I really appreciate all the work that Lauren is doing with CESOSS, helping us out, and extend all my love to each and every one of the interns. I'm very, very proud of all of you. I think it is hopeful to know that with the community effort, with the intergenerational process that is taking place in this community, we can cultivate hope. We can cultivate an understanding that, like Santiago says, no, que siga la batalla. Pero, you know, but at the end of the day, it doesn't have to be una batalla and a struggle where we have to become angry or none of those feelings. I think this is something to celebrate, no? Getting involved in our communities, getting to know who we are, getting to know why we do what we do. I think that's what we need, no? Pride in ourselves, pride in our communities, have our querencia, and always stay alert on the things that matter to us, and maybe gain that capacity to change the little things that we can change and make peace with those that we can't. And so, but I believe that all of us together, we can make a big change, you know? And so, and it might take a long time before this consciousness of greed and dispossession and racism and all of those awful things that we have to endure, that perhaps will pass, no? And I think that for us, you know, the hope that exists is that we can all do our part to end that. And if we do that in our own lives, in our own doing, I think that we are contributing to change this world. And so thank you to each and every one of you. I'm very proud of all of you. Thank you so much.
Pray for rain.
Pray for rain. Bueno, everybody, thank you very much, senators, for coming. Also, I want to acknowledge Xavier, who's also our youngest intern. He's going to be working with us. We have a few projects in the community that we're going to be organizing, one in particular, the Hidden Gems. And so you'll be hearing about that. Thank you so very much and have a wonderful rest of the day.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.